The LG G1 and the Sony A90J are the flagship OLEDs for 2021. Both are excellent TVs, but what's the difference between them and which one is the best for you? That's what we're going to find out today. Hi, I'm Brandon, a test developer at Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. We bought the 65-inch LG G1 to test, but it's also available in a 55 and 77-inch size. For the Sony A90J, we tested the 55-inch, but it's also available in a 65 or massive 83-inch. We expect the various sizes to have similar performance. For some tests, like contrast and response time, the results tend to be the same for almost all OLEDs, so we're not going to dwell too much on them. If you'd like more info, be sure to check out our videos on the G1 versus the C1 and the review of the Sony A90J. Alright, let's take a quick look at the overall design of each TV. From the front, they look almost the same, except for the feet. One thing to note here is that the G1 doesn't actually come with a stand, as it's intended to be wall-mounted. In the box, the G1 includes a slim, no-gap wall mount to do so. You can buy the feet separately though, and the ones that we attached are from last year's G10. On the A90J, the feet can be set up in a few ways. You can have them flat so that the TV sits very close to the table, or raised to make room for a soundbar. On the 83-inch model, you can also set them closer to accommodate smaller TV stands. The backs are pretty different. On the LG, you can see this top portion here is for the included slim wall mount, but you also get holes for a VESA 300 by 300 mount. There's a small hook here so that all cables pass through for a cleaner look, and if you decide to go with the feet, you can pass the cables through them. The Sony has a cover too, and it comes with clips to tie the cables to the feet. In terms of thickness, the LG is much thinner, and it comes with a slim wall mount. So if you want a TV that sits flush against the wall when mounted, the LG is the one to get. As for build quality, there's not much to say other than they're both outstanding. They feel solid and don't wobble much, as expected from flagship models. For smart features, the LG runs on their Web OS, and the Sony runs on Google TV. They're both pretty easy to use, so it's just down to personal preference. Both TVs have voice control, either through Google Assistant, Alexa, or both. The remotes have mostly the same functions. The biggest difference is that you can use the LG's remote like a pointer. Now, let's just do a short overview of the two TVs before we get into the finer details. Basically, the G1 and the A90J are very similar overall. Just like almost all other OLEDs, they're fantastic for dark rooms, especially for watching movies and HDR content, because they can display those really inky blacks. Motion handling is usually excellent on OLEDs because they have a near instantaneous response time, which is great for watching fast content like sports or gaming. Depending on the content, visibility could be an issue in very bright rooms. We'll talk more about that later. If you plan on gaming, LG clearly leads ahead here thanks to the more HDMI 2.1 ports and support for VRR, which Sony still hasn't implemented since they promised it on last year's X900H. For use as a PC monitor, they're about the same. Just know that Sony doesn't support 1440p at 120 Hz if that applies to your use case. With that out of the way, let's get into the individual test results. First up is contrast, and since they're both OLEDs, they deliver excellent results. They have a near infinite contrast ratio, which means you get inky blacks with no backlight bleed or other artifacts associated with local dimming. Simply, it's the best that you can get for dark rooms. For brighter rooms, then you need to consider the overall screen brightness and the reflection handling. There are some slight differences between the two TVs, but overall, they're pretty much the same. In our real scene test, the LG is just a little bit brighter, but that's not really noticeable, and the Sony was brighter in most of our window size test. They both have an automatic brightness limiter, which is common for OLEDs, and you can see that they both go down to around 170 to 190 nits when the whole screen is lit. This might be a problem in terms of visibility when watching bright content, like sports. But again, there's no clear winner here. They're both within the same ballpark. There's not much to say about the reflection handling. They're almost identical and outstanding on both, but you still might have bothersome reflections if you have a bright light source opposite of the TV. Both LG and Sony promised a brighter image this year, and that's partially true, at least in HDR. Again, they get to about the same level of brightness in real scenes, just a little over 700 nits. That's about a 60 to 70 nit increase from last year's models. They differ a bit when we measure the individual windows, but overall, you'll get about the same brightness on both. So with either one, you'll get a decent HDR experience in a bright room and a fantastic HDR experience in a dark room. The same goes for the HDR brightness in game mode, although they both drop by about 100 nits. The viewing angles are again very similar. We measured slightly better performance on the LG because the color red didn't fade as quickly as on the Sony. That being said, they're excellent on both, so it's not something you need to worry about. For color gamut, both TVs have essentially full P3 coverage, and the color volume is the same too. It's slightly better on the LG, but the difference is tiny and not noticeable to most people. The calibration is a bit better on the Sony out of the box, but this varies between units. For gradation, the A90J has better gradient handling, which is no surprise as Sony is known to perform well here. Gradients on the LG still look pretty good, but it struggles a bit more in darker colors. You can enable smooth gradation to improve this, but it may smooth away fine details in scenes. Of course, the G1 and the A90J are both OLEDs, and they have the same risk of permanent burn-in. They also have features built in to help prevent burn-in. It shouldn't be a problem for most people, but if you plan on using it as a monitor, or you're the type of person to leave the same news channel on all day, then you need to keep that in mind. Before we get to the inputs, let's quickly touch on the motion handling. It's basically almost identical. They both have 120 Hz refresh rate, a near instantaneous response time, as well as black frame insertion feature and motion interpolation. There might be some slight differences here and there visually because they have different image processing, but in terms of response time, stutter, and judder, they are nearly the same. Where we do see a difference is when it comes to variable refresh rate support. LG has had VRR on their TVs for years, and it's here too. The G1 supports HDMI 4 VRR, FreeSync, and G-Sync compatibility. As mentioned earlier, Sony is way behind every other company and still hasn't implemented VRR. As for compatibility with the new consoles, the PS5 and Xbox Series X, Sony doesn't support 1440p at 120 Hz, and it can't display 4K at 120 Hz in Dolby Vision yet, whereas the LG recently received an update that enables this. So if you want a game, the LG is the clear winner here. Input lag is a bit higher on the Sony, but it's not really noticeable. You should get a very responsive gaming or desktop experience on both TVs. For inputs, the LG has 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, whereas the Sony only has 2. Most people should be fine with 2 for now, but for future-proofing, having 4 is definitely a plus. The Sony still has a composite port, but you need an adapter for it, and it's not included. And the LG doesn't have a composite port at all. Both TVs support eARC, and the Sony supports Dolby and DTS signals, whereas LG only supports Dolby. If you don't have a home theater system or dedicated soundbar, the LG's internal speakers sound better. There's more bass extension, and they don't sound as boomy as the Sony's. Alright, so let's get to our final verdict. Which is better, the LG G1 or the Sony A90J? If your main concern is picture quality, they're extremely similar. The biggest difference is the image processing. Generally speaking, Sony has better image processing, but you'll pay a hefty premium for that because it's significantly more expensive than the LG. If you want to game or use the TV as a PC monitor, then the clear winner here is the LG. The G1 already has VRR, it supports 1440p at 120 Hz, and the 2 additional HDMI 2.1 ports are much appreciated. So that's it. What do you think of the LG C1 or the Sony A90J? Are those TVs going to be on your must-buy list? Let us know below. You can check out all of the measurements on our website. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel. You can also become an insider on the website for early access to our latest results. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.